My sister made me executor, so I'd take the blame. The first time my sister asked me to be executor of Dad's estate, I thought she was finally trusting me with something important. That should have been my first warning. Because my sister never handed over control unless the thing in her hands was already burning. Dad had been gone for 11 days when Nina called me. I was standing in my kitchen, still wearing the black dress from another meeting with the funeral home, staring at a casserole someone had dropped off that neither of us had touched. Nina's voice was soft. Too soft. I can't handle the paperwork, she said. I know everyone thinks I'm the organized one, but I'm falling apart. I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes. We're both falling apart. I know, she said quickly. That's why I think you should be executor. I opened my eyes. What? Dad trusted you, she said. You were always the responsible one. That wasn't true. Dad loved me, but Nina had been the one who lived 10 minutes away. Nina had been the one who drove him to appointments, picked up his prescriptions, handled his mail, and knew the neighbors by name. I lived 2 hours away and came on weekends. So when she said Dad trusted me more, it didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded like a door being opened from the wrong side. I thought the will already named you, I said. It did, Nina said, but I don't want it. I can sign a renunciation. The attorney said it's simple. What attorney? There was a pause. Mr. Halpern, Dad's estate attorney. I had never heard that name before. Dad had used the same small-town lawyer for 30 years, a woman named Patricia Sloan. She had handled Mom's probate, Dad's deed, even my divorce papers. Since when did Dad have a new attorney? I asked. He changed some things last year. Changed what? Nina sighed, and there it was. Annoyance under the grief. Can we not do this right now? I'm trying to make this easier. I should have said no. I should have asked for the will. I should have driven to Dad's house that night and opened every drawer. Instead, I heard my sister sounding exhausted, and I thought grief had made me suspicious. So I said, send me whatever I need to sign. 2 days later, I was sitting in a conference room across from Mr. Halpern. He was younger than I expected, with a shiny watch and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Nina sat beside me with a tissue twisted in her hand. Mr. Halpern slid the papers across the table. This is a voluntary transfer of executor duties, he said. Your sister is declining to serve. You're petitioning the court to be appointed. I looked at Nina. You're sure? Her eyes filled. I can't go through Dad's accounts, she whispered. I'll see his handwriting, his bills, his life. I can't. That made sense. Pain makes strange things believable. I signed. The court approved it within 3 weeks. And the moment I became executor, the phone calls started. First came the bank. A woman named Gloria asked me to verify several estate account withdrawals. What withdrawals? I asked. There was silence. Then she said carefully, you are the executor, correct? Yes. Then you may want to come in. I drove there the next morning. Gloria brought me into a side office and placed a folder in front of me. Dad's savings account had held just under $184,003 months before he died. The balance now was $11,420. My hands went cold. That can't be right. Gloria turned one page. There were cashier's checks, wire transfers, cash withdrawals, all dated before Dad died. Some only days before. Who signed for these? I asked. Gloria pointed. Dad's signature appeared again and again. But the letters looked wrong. The D leaned too far forward. The last name was cramped. Dad had signed his name the same way for 70 years. Large first letter, clean underline, slight loop in the T. This was close. Too close. But not his. I need copies of everything, I said. Gloria looked uncomfortable. I can provide what the estate is entitled to, but I should tell you something. What? These transactions were questioned internally before your father passed. My throat tightened. By who? By your father. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. Dad questioned them. She nodded. He called us about a large withdrawal. He said he didn't authorize it. When? 6 days before he died. I gripped the folder. What happened? He was told to come in with identification. Did he? Gloria's eyes dropped. No, the next day someone came in with a power of attorney. My chest tightened. Who? She hesitated. Your sister. I drove to Nina's house with the copies on the passenger seat. Every red light felt personal. When she opened the door, she was wearing one of Dad's old sweaters. For 1 second, it almost worked. I almost softened. Then I remembered the bank folder. Why did you have Dad's power of attorney? I asked. Her face changed so quickly I knew she had been waiting for the question. Because he gave it to me. When? Last year. Why didn't I know? Because you weren't here. The words hit exactly where she aimed them. I stepped inside. You used it the day after Dad reported missing money. Nina crossed her arms. I used it because Dad was confused. Confused enough to notice $173,000 missing. Her eyes flashed. You think I stole from him? I think you know where the money went. She walked past me into the living room. Dad was helping me. With what? My mortgage, medical bills, things got tight. Then why not tell me? Because you judge everything. That was Nina's favorite weapon. Any question became judgment. Any boundary became cruelty. Any truth she didn't like became an attack. I pulled out the copies. These signatures don't look like Dad's. She barely glanced at them. He was sick. He had arthritis in one hand. He didn't forget how to write his own name. Nina's mouth tightened. You signed up to be executor. Maybe act like it instead of accusing your grieving sister. There it was. The reminder. You signed. You're responsible now. I left with more questions than answers. That night, I opened every document Mr. Halpern had sent me. The will was simple. The house was to be sold. The remaining estate split evenly between Nina and me. But the estate inventory listed assets that no longer existed. Savings account, $184,000. Checking, $22,000. Investment account, $96,000. Personal property, estimated $40,000. Total estate value, $342,000. The actual money left was nowhere near that. I stared at the numbers until the room blurred. If I filed that inventory, it would be false. If I corrected it, I would have to explain where the money went. And as executor, my name would be on every answer. That was when I understood the first layer. Nina hadn't made me executor because she trusted me. She had made me executor because the estate was already empty. And now I was the one holding the bag. The next morning, I called Mr. Halpern. I need to know who prepared the estate inventory. He sounded cheerful. Your sister provided preliminary figures from your father's records. Those figures are wrong. How wrong? Over $200,000 wrong. His cheerfulness vanished. That's serious. Yes, it is. Then you need to file corrected figures. And report the missing money. He paused. Careful with your wording. Money withdrawn before death may not be estate property. Even if the signatures were forged. Another pause. Do you have proof of that? Not yet. But I knew where to start. Dad's house had been sitting untouched since the funeral. Nina said she couldn't bear to go inside. Now I wondered if she had already taken everything she needed. I drove there with a box of trash bags and a notebook. The house smelled like dust, lemon cleaner, and Dad's aftershave. His slippers were still beside the recliner. His reading glasses were on the table. For a few minutes, I just stood there and missed him so hard I could hardly move. Then I made myself open his desk. Dad had labeled everything. Insurance. Taxes. Medical. House. Bank. But one folder had been shoved behind the others. Not labeled. Inside were copies of bank statements with yellow highlights. Dates circled. Amounts underlined. And on the top page, in Dad's shaky handwriting, were 4 words. Ask Nina about this. I sat down. The withdrawals had started 7 months before Dad died. Small at first. $2,000. $4,500. Then larger. $18,000. $27,000. $39,000. Each time, the signature looked less like his. Behind the statements was a printed email. It was from Dad to Nina. Subject: we need to talk. Nina. The bank says these were authorized. I did not sign these. If you know anything, tell me now. I don't want police involved, but I will not be made a fool in my own house. Dad. My eyes burned. He had known. He had known before he died. And Nina had looked me in the face at his funeral and cried like she had lost the safest person in her life. Maybe she had. Maybe she had lost the one person still willing to protect her. At the bottom of the folder was one more thing. A business card. Patricia Sloan. Dad's old attorney. On the back, Dad had written, appointment Thursday, bring bank file. Dad died Wednesday night. I sat there holding that card, feeling the story shift under me. This wasn't just missing money. Dad had been about to do something. And he died before he could. I called Patricia Sloan from Dad's kitchen. She answered herself. When I told her who I was, she went quiet. I wondered when you'd call, she said. You knew Dad was coming to see you. Yes. About the money. Yes. My grip tightened on the phone. What did he tell you? That he believed someone was using an old power of attorney to access his accounts. Old. It was drafted after your mother died. It gave your sister authority only if your father became incapacitated. He wasn't incapacitated. No, Patricia said, he was not. My heart started pounding. Nina used it anyway. I suspected as much. Why didn't you say anything? Because your father died before our appointment, and I did not represent the estate afterward. Why not? She hesitated. Because your sister informed me the family had chosen other counsel. I looked around Dad's kitchen. The magnets on the fridge. The calendar still turned to March. The chair where he drank coffee every morning. Nina chose Mr. Halpern. I know, Patricia said. Did Dad change his will? No. Did he change attorneys? No. The room seemed to tilt. Then why did Mr. Halpern say he did? Patricia's voice hardened. That is a question I would very much like answered. I drove home with Dad's folder buckled into the passenger seat like it was alive. By then, I had the second layer. Nina had not just drained Dad's money. She had used a power of attorney that shouldn't have worked. But that raised the next question. How had the bank accepted it? The answer came 3 days later in the mail. A notice from the probate court. Someone had filed a creditor claim against Dad's estate for $126,000. The claimant was a company I had never heard of. Haven Financial Recovery. The attached document said Dad had personally guaranteed a private loan for Nina. 6 months before he died. I read the papers 3 times. Then I saw the signature. Dad's name. Same wrong D. Same cramped last name. Same fake underline. This was why Nina had wanted me as executor. Not only was the estate empty, it supposedly owed money. If I challenged the claim, I had to prove Dad hadn't signed. If I approved it, the estate would be insolvent. Either way, I was the one responsible. I called Nina again. This time, she didn't pretend to be sad. What did you do? I asked. You need to be more specific. Haven Financial. Silence. Then a tired laugh. Oh. It was a loan. Dad didn't sign it. You don't know that. Yes, I do. You weren't there. I stood at my dining room table with the claim spread in front of me. That seems to be the answer for everything. Because it's true, she snapped. You weren't there when the roof leaked. You weren't there when Dad fell. You weren't there when I had to miss work to take him to appointments. So you charged him $126,000. I borrowed money to survive. Then why is Dad's name on it? Because he said he would help me. But he didn't sign. Nina went quiet. When she spoke again, her voice was low. Be careful, Rachel. It was the first time she had used my name like a threat. You're the executor now. If you start accusing people without proof, you're going to make yourself look incompetent. There it was again. You're the executor. Your name. Your problem. After we hung up, I stopped being angry. Anger was too messy. I needed facts. I requested every bank record. I requested every loan document. I requested copies of the power of attorney. I asked Patricia Sloan for Dad's original files. And then I waited. Waiting was the hardest part because grief kept sneaking in whenever the anger got tired. I would find Dad's handwriting on an old grocery list and start crying. Then I would remember someone had copied that handwriting to steal from him. And I would get back to work. The first real break came from Patricia. She sent a scanned copy of the original power of attorney. The document had two important clauses. Nina could act only if Dad's doctor certified him unable to manage his affairs. And she had to keep complete records. I read that sentence over and over. Complete records. If Nina had used the power of attorney, she had to show where every dollar went. Then the bank records arrived. They showed the withdrawals. But more importantly, they showed where 3 wire transfers landed. Not in Nina's personal account. Not directly. They went to Haven Financial Recovery. The same company now claiming Dad owed them money. I stared at the page. Nina had used Dad's money to pay a company that was now saying Dad owed more money. It made no sense. Unless the loan itself was part of the same trap. That was the midpoint for me. Until then, I thought Nina had stolen from Dad and panicked. But this looked planned. The withdrawals. The fake signatures. The loan. The new attorney. The executor transfer. It wasn't damage control. It was a structure. A way to empty Dad's estate, create debt, and put me in charge just in time to be blamed for the collapse. I called Haven Financial. A man named Victor answered. When I identified myself as executor, he immediately became polished. We've been expecting your call. That sentence made my skin crawl. Who told you to expect it? Your attorney. My attorney. Mr. Halpern. I wrote his name down, even though I didn't need to. What did he tell you? That the estate intended to resolve the claim promptly. I never said that. No, but he indicated there would be no dispute. I looked at the loan papers. I am disputing it. Victor's tone changed. On what basis? Forgery. A long silence. Then he said, that is a very serious accusation. I know. You should understand that delaying payment may expose the estate to additional costs. Send all communication in writing. I hung up before he could threaten me politely again. Then I drove to Mr. Halpern's office without calling. His receptionist looked startled when I walked in. I need to speak with him. Do you have an appointment? No. He's with a client. I'll wait. I sat there for 40 minutes with Dad's folder in my lap. When Mr. Halpern finally opened his door, his smile twitched. Rachel, I wish you had called. I bet you do. Inside his office, I placed the Haven claim on his desk. Why did Haven Financial think I wasn't going to dispute this? He glanced at the papers. I may have had a preliminary conversation. You told them the estate would resolve it. I said we would review it. No, you told them there would be no dispute. His eyes cooled. I understand you're emotional. I leaned forward. Don't do that. Excuse me. Don't hide behind my grief because you don't like my questions. For the first time, he looked genuinely irritated. You need to remember your duty as executor. My duty is to protect the estate. Your duty is also to avoid unnecessary litigation. Even when the debt is forged. If you can prove that. I pulled out the power of attorney. Did you review this before advising Nina? I did not advise your sister before your appointment. That was too careful. Did she bring you this document? He folded his hands. I'm not able to discuss privileged communications. She wasn't your client if you represented the estate. She consulted me regarding probate. Before Dad died. His expression froze. Just for a second. But it was enough. I gathered the papers. Thank you, I said. For what? For finally answering something. He hadn't meant to. But he had. Mr. Halpern knew about this before Dad died. That meant Nina had gone to him while Dad was still alive. While Dad was asking questions. While Dad was preparing to see Patricia. The third layer was worse than theft. Nina had been preparing for Dad's death before he died. Not causing it. I didn't believe that. Dad had heart disease. The medical examiner listed natural causes. There was no mystery there. But Nina had seen an opportunity coming. And she had built a net for whoever stepped into the estate afterward. Me. The final proof came from the most ordinary place. Dad's email. I found the password in his desk, written on a card he had labeled internet stuff, because Dad trusted paper more than memory. Most of his inbox was newsletters, pharmacy reminders, church announcements, and hardware store coupons. Then I searched Nina's name. Hundreds of emails appeared. At first, they were normal. Appointments. Grocery lists. Updates. Then 7 months before his death, the tone changed. Dad asked about missing checks. Nina said he was mistaken. Dad asked why the bank called her instead of him. Nina said she was helping. Dad asked why she had contacted an attorney named Halpern. Nina said he was confused. Then I found the email that made me sit back from the screen. It was from Nina to Dad, 3 weeks before he died. Dad, Rachel already said she doesn't want to be involved. If you keep accusing me, you are going to leave a mess neither of us can fix. Let me handle this quietly. Once the estate is settled, no one has to know how bad things got. Nina. My stomach turned. Rachel already said she doesn't want to be involved. I had never said that. I had not even known there was anything to be involved in. I kept searching. And then I found the forwarded message. Nina had sent Mr. Halpern a draft of the Executor renunciation before Dad died. The message was short. If my sister takes over after, does that protect me from being accused of mishandling estate assets? Mr. Halpern replied. It depends on timing and documentation. The cleaner the transfer, the better. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time. The cleaner the transfer, the better. There it was. Not a confession. Something better. A map. Nina's plan had never been to hide the missing money forever. It was to make the timeline look like I had taken control before anyone noticed. If the estate inventory stayed inflated, I looked careless. If the creditor claim got paid, I looked complicit. If I challenged it too late, I looked negligent. And if anyone asked why Nina had walked away, she could say she was too devastated to serve. The grieving daughter. The overwhelmed caregiver. The sister who begged me to help. I printed everything. Then I called Patricia Sloan. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, Rachel, you need your own attorney. I thought that was you. I can be if you want me to be, but understand what this becomes. What? A petition to remove prior counsel, challenge the creditor claim, compel your sister to account for her use of the power of attorney, and potentially refer the matter for criminal investigation. The words sounded heavy. But for the first time in weeks, they also sounded clean. Do it, I said. Nina was served 8 days later. She called me 12 times. I didn't answer. Then she came to my house. I watched her through the front window as she stood on my porch, arms wrapped around herself, face pale with fury. When I opened the door, she pushed past me. You have no idea what you've done. I know exactly what I've done. You're destroying this family. No, I said, I'm documenting who already did. Her eyes filled with tears. But I had seen those tears too many times. Some people cried because they were hurt. Nina cried because it had always worked. I took care of him, she said. Me, not you. I know you did. That surprised her. I kept my voice steady. You took him to appointments, you bought groceries, you handled things I should have helped with more. Her face softened. For 1 second, she thought I was opening the door to guilt. Then I said, and then you used that truth as permission to rob him. The softness vanished. You don't know what it was like. Then tell me. She laughed bitterly. You want the truth, fine, Dad promised to help me. With what? My business. You didn't have a business. I was going to. And there it was. The final layer beginning to show. Not medical bills. Not mortgage panic. Not caregiver expenses. A business. What business? She looked away. I invested in a senior care placement service. It was supposed to connect families with caregivers. I almost couldn't speak. You stole from Dad to fund a business about caring for elderly people. I didn't steal, I borrowed. Dad didn't know. He would have said no. Then it wasn't borrowing. Her mouth trembled. It was supposed to work. I was going to pay it back before probate. No one would have known. I stared at my sister and finally understood the deepest truth. She hadn't hated Dad. She hadn't even thought of herself as cruel. She had convinced herself she deserved repayment for being the daughter who stayed close. Then she gambled Dad's money on a future where she became successful enough to call the theft temporary. But the business failed. The money disappeared. Dad noticed. And when he started asking questions, she stopped trying to fix what she had done and started trying to survive it. That was why the betrayal felt so complete. She had not stolen because she was desperate for food or shelter. She had stolen because she believed her sacrifice entitled her to his savings. Then she tried to turn my grief into her shield. What was Haven Financial? I asked. Her shoulders dropped. A private lender. For the business? Yes. And Dad's guarantee. She said nothing. You forged it. I was going to fix it. Stop saying that. I was. You were going to let me approve a fake debt from Dad's estate. Her eyes hardened. You always land on your feet. I stepped back. That sentence told me more than any document had. This was not just about money. It was resentment. Years of it. Nina believed I had escaped the burden of Dad's decline. So in her mind, making me carry the legal wreckage was balance. Not betrayal. Balance. You wanted me punished, I said. She didn't deny it. You got to be the good daughter from a distance, she whispered. Birthday calls, weekend visits, flowers. Meanwhile, I was here watching him forget appointments and drop pills and call me 3 times about the same bill. I swallowed hard. You could have asked me for help. I shouldn't have had to. She was right about that. And wrong about everything she did after. That was the painful part. The part I couldn't make simple. I had failed her in some ways. But she had chosen to punish Dad for it. Then punish me. I'm sorry I wasn't there more, I said. For the first time, her eyes flickered. But I'm not taking the blame for what you did. She left without another word. Court was not dramatic. Real consequences rarely are. There was no screaming confession. No sudden gasp from the room. Just documents. Timelines. Bank records. Emails. The power of attorney. The forged signatures. Patricia was calm and relentless. Mr. Halpern withdrew from the estate after Patricia filed a complaint with the bar. Haven Financial's claim was suspended pending fraud review. The judge ordered Nina to provide a full accounting of every transaction she made under Dad's power of attorney. She couldn't. Within 2 months, the civil case became a criminal investigation. Within 4, Nina agreed to repay what she could through the sale of her house and whatever remained of the failed business assets. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. The estate did not magically become whole. Dad's savings were mostly gone. His house had to be sold to cover taxes, legal costs, and valid debts. By the time everything settled, my inheritance was smaller than the number on Dad's old inventory, by more than anyone wanted to say out loud. But the point was no longer the money. The point was the record. Dad had not been careless. He had not signed away his savings. He had not left behind a financial disaster. Someone had done that to him. And finally, his name was cleared. Nina pleaded guilty to financial exploitation and forgery. She avoided prison because of the repayment agreement and her lack of prior record, but she received probation, community service, and a felony conviction that ended any chance of working in elder care again. When she stood in court, she did not look at me. I was grateful for that. I didn't want one more performance. Afterward, Patricia handed me Dad's original bank folder. "I thought you might want this." I opened it in my car. Inside was the same page with his handwriting. "Ask Nina about this." But underneath it, tucked between two statements, was a note I hadn't seen before. "Rachel, if you are reading this, I waited too long to ask for help. That is my pride, not your fault. Do not let anyone make you carry what they chose. Love, Dad." I sat in the courthouse parking lot and cried until my chest hurt. Not because everything was fixed. It wasn't. My sister and I did not reconcile. Dad's house belonged to strangers now. The money he saved for decades was mostly gone. But for the first time since Nina called me, I could breathe without feeling like a hand was around my throat. She had made me executor, so I would take the blame. Instead, I became the one person with the authority to uncover the truth. And that was the part she never expected. She thought grief would make me weak. She forgot grief can also make you loyal. Not to the person crying the loudest. To the person who could no longer defend himself.